Well, first of all, thank you so much, Dr. Edgar Mitchell, for joining me. It's a pleasure to have you on my show. How you doing this morning?
I'm doing fine, and glad to be with you.
Now, to the 1% of the world that actually do not know who you are, why don't you tell them who you are? Who is Dr. Edgar Mitchell?
Well, Dr. Edgar Mitchell is Apollo 14 astronaut and flew to the moon in 1971 aboard Apollo 14 and landed on the moon. And having a large number of academic credentials as well. And I've been a research scientist for the last 34 years in the area of consciousness studies.
So what inspired you, Doctor, to become an astronaut? I mean, a lot of people growing up, I know myself, when I was 7 years old, I was like, I want to be an astronaut when I grow up. Was that the same thing with you, or did something happen in your life to kind of transpire you to do this?
Well, it kind of more happened by circumstance. When I graduated from college in 1952 with an intent to go into industry, in management in industry, the Korean War was on and the draft was in force, and I was about to be drafted into the Army. I started flying when I was 13 years old and already had a pilot's license when I went off to college. And I said, well, I prefer to go into either the Air Force or the Navy Air Wing if I'm going to serve the country, which I was glad to do. But unfortunately for my plans, I had just recently married my college sweetheart, and neither the Navy nor the Air Force took married men into their flight program as cadets at that point. And so I had to figure out a new way to do that if I was going to fly. And so I enlisted in the Navy, went to boot camp, became a seaman, then went to officer school and got a commission. And from officer school, I was able to go to Pensacola, which is a Navy flight school, get my Navy wings. And so I spent the 1950s aboard an aircraft carrier in the Pacific during the Korean War. Of course, the Korean War ended very shortly, about halfway through that. And I was coming back from the Pacific aboard a carrier on October the 4th, 1957. And that was the day Sputnik went up. I realized that a new path in human discovery and existence had just opened up. And I thought I'd be interested in that. And I was coming back to test pilot duty. I was a pretty good pilot. So I came back to test pilot duty. The first astronauts were just being selected at that point, but all of the first guys were just a few years older than me and already had a few years of test pilot experience. So I felt the need to catch up. And doing that, I went back to school and got more education, got a doctorate from MIT. And long story short, I was selected into the Apollo program in 1966.
Now, I understand being an astronaut, a NASA astronaut, there's a lot of rigorous testing that's involved before you could actually go into outer space. Could you share some of that with us? What do you have to go through to get up there?
Well, the main thing, of course, was your piloting skills and being in good health and being devoted to this project that we were in and going through the rigors of selection. So I said, not being on the selection board myself, I don't know what they were looking for, except I was successful in getting to go. And so I'm sure it had to. I was the first astronaut to have both a PhD from a major technical school and test pilot credentials, and so that I'm sure helped me quite along in getting aboard the Apollo program.
Now, was there any time, though, during these testings, because I've always seen video of you guys, like, spinning around in circles and going upside down, was there ever a time you were like, whoa, I just don't know if I can handle this? But, of course, you're probably used to this being a good pilot, as it was.
Well, I would say yes. There wasn't anything that I found discouraging or out of hand. It was just all a part of the training and getting ready to go.
Almost sounds to me like this is just something that you were born to do.
Might be.
Okay, I wanted to ask, what were you doing when the Apollo 13 crisis took place? Where were you? What was going on?
Well, there's a little story that goes with that, too. When I first went into the Apollo program, our first chore was to select what we would like to do as a technical assignment. And Fred Hayes and I, a buddy from both chose and the lunar module, because we thought that would probably get us closer to a lunar visit. And so we were sent to Grumman Aircraft Factory in Long Island to help build the first lunar module. And our responsibility was being crew and the Apollo crew that would help the factory test the spacecraft and get it ready for delivery to NASA. And when we had done that, and the first flight test was on Apollo 9 of the lunar module, we were free to enter the crew assignment cycle. And our policy at that time was you served as a backup crewman on a flight, and 3 flights later you could be advanced to a prime crew slot. Well, after Fred and I did our job and sent the first lunar module for Apollo 9 to Cape Kennedy, we then, I was assigned to Apollo 10 as backup, and Fred was assigned to Apollo 11 as backup. And our practice at that time was that 3 flights later, we could be moved to a prime crew slot. Well, 3 flights later for me would be Apollo 13, and 3 flights later for Fred would be Apollo 14, since he served back up on Apollo 11. Well, that was fine, except for the fact I served back up on Apollo 10 with Gordon Cooper. He and I were the lunar module crew for Apollo 10. And Apollo 10 was simply a dress rehearsal going to the moon. They did everything but physically land. However, after Apollo 10, Gordon Cooper wanted to retire from the program, and Alan Shepard, who had been grounded, our first guy in space, who had been grounded with Meniere's syndrome but had that corrected, had lobbied to come on and take Gordo's place on Apollo 13. We were both assigned to Apollo 13. However, headquarters said, Alan, you haven't been in the training loop for some time. Perhaps it's best you take a little more time, your crew take a little more time to get in shape for your assignment. So instead of flying prime crew on Apollo 13, they negotiated a switch with Apollo 14, which was Fred Hayes and Jim Lovell were the lunar module crew, and Ken Mattingly, the command module pilot. Well, as you know, if you saw the Apollo 13 movie, they're the ones. They got a bad machine, and we got a good machine. As it turned out, our flight was called Apollo 14, but actually it was Apollo 13, because we flew the Apollo 13 mission after their spacecraft had trouble. Now, you'll also may remember that Ken Mattingly got bumped from Apollo 13.
The measles or something, right?
He had been exposed to the measles among one of the astronaut's children, and the medics were afraid he'd come down with the measles in flight. He wouldn't have, of course. He didn't get the measles. But nevertheless, they bumped him, and what that caused to have happen was Ken and I were the 2 senior lunar module and command module pilots, respectively, on the ground. And so we spent all the time of Apollo 13 in our simulators, me in the lunar module simulator and he in the command module simulator, doing what we had to do before they had to do it in space to get them back. And that was our task doing Apollo 13. And my buddy Fred Hayes, who I'd worked at Grumman with, of course, was on Apollo 13 and flying the lunar module. That helped bring them home. The lunar module was the lifeboat tugboat that got Apollo 13 home. So that was the story of my involvement with Apollo 13.
How accurate was the movie compared to the actual reality that took place?
It was quite good. The Apollo 13 movie was a good movie. I can't remember any little details I would complain about, but no, it was a good movie, and Ron Howard and Tom Hanks did a good job with it. Had a little interesting story. When the Apollo 13 movie premiered at Houston, it was shown in the theater at the Space Center, and when I walked into the door, Tom Hanks and Ron Howard were waiting for me. And they said, "Mitch, we got to talk to you." And I said, "Well, what do you want to talk about?" They said, "Well, unfortunately, most of your footage ended up on the cutting room floor. We had too much film, and so unfortunately the editors cut out most of your pieces." Well, they made it up to me in the TV version of To the Moon and Back, but my part in Apollo 13 turned out to be zero.
Oh. And then I heard on the movie, too, when they were saying going to the moon is as exciting as going to Pittsburgh. I'm thinking, how could you even compare it to that?
Well, I don't think I said that. But
Well, not you. It wasn't you that said it. It was one of the news guys. I forget who exactly it was. A TV network, yeah. That you guys, or Apollo 13, that when they were broadcasting, it was actually bumped. If that's fact. If that's
could be.
Yeah, that's what they were saying. And I remember thinking, I could go to the moon 100 times and it would be just like the first time, every single time. But let's move ahead here a little bit, okay? Let's get to Apollo 14. You're next on the list, man. You know you're going to space. You know you're going to land on the moon. What is going through your mind and your crew's mind knowing this is the next mission following the Apollo 13 crisis? Actually, technically, like you said, you are 13, but play us through that. What's your mindset like? What's the atmosphere?
Well, we all made very, very sure that we understood the problem on Apollo 13 and the error that took place in the manufacturing process. Made sure that it wasn't there again. We did everything we could to make sure that the follow-on vehicles didn't have the same problem that Apollo 13 did. And that was what quality control was all about. And we were very good at it, and we spent a lot of time with going to factories and things, talking to the workers and saying, "Hey, our lives are on the line here. Do us a good job. Thank you."
What is it like with your family? I mean, I know you got a wife then. What is it like with her? I mean, is there fear? Is there worry? Is it like, I don't want you to go?
I'm sure there must have been. However, all of our ladies were monumental in their demeanor and seeing through all of this and putting up with all the nonsense and all the fears and craziness. They were a wonderful bunch of ladies, and they did us proud during those moon missions, that's for sure.
Well, I'll tell you one thing right now. You guys are the true pioneers of the entire world. And that's a fact. I mean, we talk about Christopher Columbus and all them guys, but seriously, to me, going to the moon, whole different level. Just getting to space, period, whole different level, whole different ball of wax.
Well, that was our time. It was our time, and our place in history was that it was time to get off this planet and start our journeys into the rest of the world, rest of the solar system. 24
hours prior to Apollo 14's liftoff, what do you guys go through?
Well, we're at Cape Kennedy. We're going through the final, making sure our checklists and everything all ready to go. In other words, final preparations. We were all at Cape Kennedy with our backup crew, and just going through the routine of making sure we were as prepared as we could be to begin the trip the next day.
All right, and this is one thing I've always wanted to know. The day of launch, you guys walk up or you take the elevator up, you're going all the way up to your little capsule there that you're going to get inside. How long are you actually strapped in before the countdown begins? Are you in there for quite some time?
Well, it's some time. And we were additionally, I think, 3 or 4 hours. I can't remember now. But we were delayed an additional 40 minutes by the fact that a thunderstorm came up, and we had to stop the countdown for that to pass. And I'll precede one of your questions by telling what happened. We shut down the countdown, put it on hold for a while, and after all that was over with, the first thing that happened was Alan Shepard, my partner that was sitting over in the other seat, said, "Mitch, wake up, we're ready to go." I took that 40 minutes to catch a little catnap.
I don't think I'd be able to sleep. I mean, what's it like, though? I mean, I'll never get to experience what you experienced, and 99% of the world won't. What is it like when it's 10, 9, 8? What is the feeling in that capsule?
Well, you're busy. I mean, you're checking your instruments, you're checking all the things you have to check, and looking to see if there's anything out of the ordinary. I mean, you have a job to do, and the job is to make sure everything's ready to go. And so, of course, we have the ground crews that are tuned into the spacecraft, and they're watching it too, but we're watching it inside the spacecraft on our instruments and making sure we're ready for launch.
Now, what about when the launch actually takes place? Is it as powerful of a feeling as everybody says?
And you're doing the same thing. You're flying this machine, and of course it's on automatic pilot at that point. But we all have our little the switches and things that we're responsible for, and we're watching to see what's happening.
Because I've always actually heard it's amazing that this machine can stay together given the power that they're feeling.
I'm sorry, say that. Ask your question again.
I said I always hear people say that it's amazing that the machine, that the spacecrafts can actually stay together because of the power. They always describe such a power during liftoff.
Well, that's true, but the designers and Werner von Braun's team that put them all together and designed them, and the manufacturers manufacturing according to specifications did a pretty good job. They were supposed to stay together, and they did. And so those were well designed and manufactured machinery. And if you've ever been to Cape Kennedy to look at a Saturn V vehicle, that's in the museum there, and look at all the parts and study all the history, you know they were very well designed. And okay, we had a few problems along the way, but that was what our training was all about, is how do you overcome the problems that arise. And we were very skilled at practice at having these problems simulated in the simulators, and we had to work around them.
All right, so take us to this point, Edgar. You just left Earth. You're entering outer space. What in the world is that like? You're looking around, and I know you got your business and all that, but is there a point in time where you can actually relax and be like, oh, okay, we did it. I can actually enjoy myself and look around?
Well, not on our flight. When we got in space, the first thing, and all of them, something or other happened. So when we got into space and we turned the command module around to dock it to the lunar module and pull it out of the stack, they didn't go together. And now the likelihood is that the thunderstorm that went over put some water in the system, and it froze and didn't allow the latching mechanism to work the first time. So we've messed around with that for 45 minutes to an hour till we finally found a way to latch in to the to the lunar module and pull it out of the stack of rocketry and get on our way. So that was a big relief, but nevertheless, and yes, going out to the moon was a couple of days of fairly quiet, not too much to do, but stay on top of things and be prepared. But all throughout the flight, there were these little problems arose where some little piece of equipment didn't work quite like it was supposed to, and you had to work around it. That's what we were trained to do.
So at no point were you ever afraid? I mean, you're designed, you're programmed to do this.
Well, we were test pilots, and we did what we had to do.
That's amazing. That's prime example why I could never do what you do. I'd probably be having a panic attack. And yeah, I would not be able to do. I have the highest respect for you guys, seriously. But I also wanted to ask there, Doctor, what does it feel like? Zero gravity. What does that feel like?
Well, the best we can tell you, we practiced doing that, of course, in an aircraft doing zero-G maneuvers. It's kind of you point up and then you go float, and you float back down. You go into a parabolic arc that gives you the sensation of zero-G. Or another way to do it is scuba diving. When you're in the water, of course, you can push against water and use your flippers and propel yourself through water, where you can't in space in zero gravity. You have to grab onto something and pull yourself along. But the closest you can come to it on Earth is what we call the vomit comet, which was an aircraft doing a
I can only imagine.
Zero-G maneuver. Or we had a lot of scuba training, which is similar, but it's in the water.
What's a normal heart rate when you're in outer space? Because I remember on Apollo 13 they were clocking at like 120. I actually think I read a book, and right before liftoff, I think it might have been Buzz. It was 140 or something like that, and I'm like, wow. I can't imagine the anxiety.
Well, depends on the period you were in. I'm sure heart rates, I mean, the doctors were monitoring us all the time, but I'm sure that during normal coasting portions of the flight, it was back down to the 70s and 80s that you would have when you're normally relaxed.
So, you're traveling towards the moon. You're on your way towards the moon. From your spacecraft, are you able to look back at this point and look at Earth getting farther and farther away?
Depends on the missions. We did it a little differently. On our particular one, we set the spacecraft up to be perpendicular to the ecliptic. Now, the plane of the ecliptic is a plane that contains the Earth, the Moon, and the Sun. We oriented the spacecraft to be perpendicular to the ecliptic and rotating to keep thermal balance on the spacecraft. So that would allow the Earth, the Moon, and the Sun every couple of minutes to come through appear in the window. And that's a pretty awesome experience. That is quite true.
I can't even imagine. What about when you're approaching the moon? Do you have to circle the moon to go to the dark side and then you land on the moon? How does that work? And is there really a dark side of the moon, or is it just a part of the moon we can't see?
Well, let's get our terminology straight. There is a backside of the moon because the same side of the moon faces Earth at all times.
Right.
So the side you can't see from Earth, we would call the backside of the moon. And there is a significant difference between the backside and the front side. But the moon has its dark and light periods too, just like Earth does.
Okay.
A lunar day is 1 month long because it takes a month for the moon to go around the Earth, and the same side of the moon is facing the Earth. So a Earth day is 24 hours. A lunar day is, or the Earth month, of course, is an Earth day, as a moon day, because the dark and light on the moon changes in 1 month. So I kind of lost track of where I was at this point.
Oh, we were just talking about the dark side of the moon, and you pretty much answered my question. I didn't know if there was one side that was completely dark, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Oh, no, it's the same as the Earth. It's rotating, so it has a dark side, a light side, but they're half a month each. But also, one thing to point out that I point out when I have a globe to show them, the backside of the moon looks more like a desert. I mean, it's brown dirt. The front side of the moon, has the dark craters filled with lava that's come out from the inside of the moon. Since during the lunar history, it was filled with molten material, call it lava, from the beginning. And in the early stages of the moon's existence around the Earth, the lava coming out was pulled out to the front side due to Earth's gravitation, and it filled the craters. So the ancient observers back several hundred years ago, looking at the moon, thought there were oceans on the moon, these craters filled with dark stuff. And they thought they were ocean. They were called mare, or the French word for ocean. But they're really just a lava rock pummeled up, and we now know to the consistency of talcum powder. And that's true on the backside as well. On the backside, it's just dirt. On the front side, there's a lot more lava rock pummeled up into talcum powder-sized particles. But the dark side, the backside, is more brown, and the dark side has a lot more dark in it, or the front side has a lot more lava material in it, or dark material in it.
Now take us through the landing, Doctor. Take us through actually landing on the moon. I know you got to separate from one craft, and then you and your partner are going down. What is that like? How fast are you traveling down there? What's going on?
Well, the whole point is we separate from the command module and get into the lunar module, and we get deposited down in a 10-mile orbit above the moon, and the command module goes back up into normally a 50 or 60-mile orbit, where he's doing lunar photography to get good photographs and things for follow-on flights. And you're getting ready in the lunar module to land. Now, lunar orbit is about 2 hours long, and exactly the speed we're going, I'd have to convert that into feet per second or miles per hour, but it takes roughly 2 hours to go around the moon at the altitude we're at, and you start your descent on the, we call it from here, the east side of the moon, the side that the sun seems to be coming up, and in such a trajectory that you get down to your landing site in about 10 or 11 minutes, and we're coming down on your back, feet first, in the spacecraft. And so that when we get down to a certain point, you pitch over and kind of fly it like an airplane into a normal landing. And it's programmed in the computer so that we have a landing radar or in the spacecraft that updates our computer so that we presumably know exactly how far above the surface we are as we're making the approach. Oh,
and you guys, I mean, I've listened to some of the videos and audio, and you guys are so brilliant when it comes down to it. 7% fuel, 50 meters, 2 feet per second. I mean, you guys got it down to the science. I mean, it's just...
Well, of course, we better.
Yeah, you better, because there ain't no hospitals or rescue units.
We practice all of this in simulators, and so our best thing was, hey, this is a pretty great simulation. Now, we did, all the missions had little problems of one sort or another when something didn't work right, and you had to overcome it, and that's what training was all about. All the training was what if this happens, what if that happens, and the people that run the simulators for us, they know how to throw in all those little problems, give us a good exercise as to how to solve these problems in space.
So take us down to where you're actually on the moon. I know you were the one that crawled out of there first, right?
No, the guy on the left side of the cockpit crawled out first.
Okay.
Because the door, and that would be, in our case, Alan Shepard on the left, because the door, the front door, or the hatch outside, opens toward the right, and you'd have to get over into the left side of the cockpit to easily get out first. So that was the way we did it. The guy on the left got out first because it was the easiest thing to do.
Now, was it you, or was it the other one that when you were coming down the ladder and you got to the surface, you kind of jumped back up just to kind of test it, and everything felt pretty good?
Well, we all did that. Because the last step on the ladder coming down. Generally, certainly in our case, we didn't compress the landing strut enough to make it an easy step down to the surface. You had to kind of jump off and float down. And you always wanted to test and see just how hard it was going to be to get back up to that first step.
Yeah, you want to make sure you get back up.
Exactly. We all did that. We'd come down and jump off the bottom step and get to the ground and then give a push, jump back up and make sure we could get that first step.
When you landed on the moon, man, and you're walking around on it and you're looking around, you are an alien. You're an alien at this point. What is going through your mind? Is it what you expected, or is it much more?
Well, it was pretty much what we expected, but there's the new parts to it too. But remember, we've got a checklist on our wrist and a watch on the other, and we're running against time. We don't have a lot of time on the moon. And okay, you take a couple of seconds and get your balance, and you look around and say, wow, here I am. Then you get back to work, and you're running right according to your checklist, so that you can get everything done that you're programmed to get done.
What kind of things do you guys do up there? I mean, what about your particular mission?
Well, the first thing we did, we had 2 periods of EVA, or extravehicular activity. The first period was to download a bunch of scientific equipment that's put together. It's called the Lunar Surface Experiments, ALSEP, Apollo Lunar Surface Experiments Package, that had quite a number of experiments that we set up about a couple hundred yards out in front of the spacecraft. They had their own power supply. They had their own little radio transmitters to transmit data back to Earth. And we set it up out in front. Took about the first 4 hours, 3.5 hours to get that done. And those little transmitters operated on the surface for 14 years before they were shut down. And one of them, a laser reflector, is still up there and still operating. They can send laser beams up and measure within a few millimeters exactly how far the moon is away at this point. And amazingly, over the 40 years, it's hardly changed its orbit more than just a few centimeters.
Now, me and my Uncle Ron, I'll say him by name, we were actually talking a couple weeks ago before I had you on the show, and we were with the group, and one believed that no one ever went to the moon, but me and him believed that you guys did go to the moon. And how does that make you feel, knowing the miracles that you guys have performed, and there are still people out there that doubt that you actually went to the moon? I mean, what do you think about that?
These days is we have some recent photographs of going to the moon that show our footprints, and they're still there. If you blow up the photographs, they're photographs of our landing sites, and you can see our footprints on the moon. So, and you can see the lunar module still sitting there, the descent stage of the lunar module sitting there. So anybody that wants to say that we didn't go to the moon just is ignorant. They don't know what they're talking about.
Well, I would agree with you 110%, bud. I truly believe you guys went, and I really wish I could have been alive back then. I mean, I'm only 33 years old right now, and I really wish I could have seen the moon landing. My goal in life, or one of the, I guess you could call it my bucket list, is to actually see man land on Mars. Do you ever see that happening?
Of course. That'd be next along the process. As a matter of fact, my doctoral thesis at MIT 50 years ago was doing a low-thrust trajectory to Mars and computing it, and that was my doctoral thesis, was a low-thrust trajectory to begin exploration of Mars. And that was 50 years ago.
How long until you think, I mean, me being 33, do you think in my lifetime that I might actually witness man step foot on Mars?
Of course, it could happen within the next few years as we get a little further along here, get our economy back in shape, and get our civilization together. I quite often say in my lectures, yes, we're going to go to Mars, but when we go to Mars, it'll sound kind of silly to say I came to the United States or China or Germany or Israel or wherever. No, we came from Earth, and we're not ready to do that yet. in due course, I point out, we've got to be off this planet. You know, our sun isn't going to last forever. Now, we've got maybe a couple of billion years left to go, which isn't a small amount. But the idea is that in due course, we have to be off this planet. So space flight and going into the rest of the solar system and beyond our solar system has to be our heritage if our civilization is to survive.
Have you ever seen anything out of the ordinary up there? Well, I know everything's probably out of the ordinary, but anything that might have raised an eyebrow like, hey, wow, that might actually been an alien spacecraft?
No, we didn't see any of that. However, that isn't to say I didn't see any, and we didn't see any such thing on our flight, even though there are some of the pundits that say we do and insist that we did, but we didn't. But I don't have any doubts that there have been alien visitations here, and I don't have much doubt that they could have used the moon or even the backside of the moon as bases, and some say that they have. I have no evidence for that whatsoever.
Now, I mean, was there anything at all that of anything walking around up there? No footprints or indentations that...
No, the moon, as far as we can tell from our examinations here, is just what it appears to be. It's a planet that's uninhabited. Now, it could very well have been inhabited, or at least have bases on it. Since there's not any real resources there that could useful, there's some resources, but you would have to take most of everything you want to survive on and to work with. You'd have to take it with you, since we don't know, and we have a lot of resources available there. There may be more than we've discovered, but at the moment it's not obvious that there's any resources that would help us create stations there. That we'd have to take everything to start with.
Right. Now, I was going to ask, if we were going to go to Mars, I mean, would it be plausible that we would actually go to the moon, build a facility there, and then launch from there to go to Mars, or do you think it would be directly from Earth?
Be directly from Earth, because that's a long way around. There's no point in going into one gravitational well called the moon to get to another one called Mars. No, I think the best way to do it will be to use our development capabilities in space, like the International Space Station, and eventually build up more capability in space to be a beginning launching station for going to Mars.
Now, a lot of people, Doctor, are kind of depressed that, NASA's not launching ships right now, and where do you think the NASA program's going? I've heard that they are constructing a new model, a new spacecraft. Is this true?
Well, yes, but hang on just a minute. I'm sorry, I've just got to interrupt. Let me get rid of this, and I'll be right back.
Yep.
Hello?
Yep.
Okay, let's forward. I'm ready to go.
All right. No, that's the great thing about not being live. I could just take that right out. Well, all right, what was I saying? What was my question? I'm trying to remember now.
Well, frankly, I kind of lost track of what you were asking also.
We were talking about Mars, going to Mars.
Going to Mars. Yes, we will go to Mars.
Oh, no, I know what we were talking about, the space shuttle that we're building right now.
Oh, okay. Well, what has happened is that we have at the moment, the President has at the moment, and NASA has at the moment, kind of emulated what we did with aircraft at the beginning of the 20th century. The Wright brothers invented the first aircraft and flew them, and 20 years later we had an airline industry. Well, in this case, we went to the moon. We started out with governments doing it, and now we have private industry starting to build spacecraft to go into space and to supply the operational aspect of going into space. Now, I'm sure the President did that at the moment because the economy is in such bad shape that we need to get the economy going again and need to get things operating more normally, and then perhaps we can go back to getting more involvement of NASA in operations. Right now, NASA's more involved in developing new approaches, new hardware, and doing the studies necessary to get us to the next step. And private industry is taking on the task of keeping spacecraft going and resupplying the International Space Station and getting ready to take passengers into space.
Now, one thing that I've always wondered is the International Space Station. What is it like up there? I don't know if you've been on that.
No, I have not.
What do you know about it? Is it like, how big is it?
About it. It's simply a facility up there. That's a facility that is pretty primitive on the inside. It's not like inside of your home. It's pretty primitive and designed for the experiments and the work that they're doing up there, and receiving a spacecraft from Earth to come up and resupply and take things down, take crew back down, and got big panels out on it to get solar energy and use that for their energy supply. If you look at all of the aspects of it, it's a very well designed and functional piece of hardware.
Now, Dr. Mitchell, what do you do nowadays in life? I mean, do you have any books out that you're promoting? I
have books out. I have 2 research foundations that I'm very active involved in, and I'm on the lecture circuit a great deal, and I attend conferences on science. And my Noetics Foundation out in California was what I started when I came back to bring the study of consciousness into science, because for 400 years that has been a no-no for scientific research and discovery.
So when you do these lectures, I mean, do you have any scheduled that are coming up? Do you have an actual calendar of events that people can check out?
I have a calendar, but the calendar is made of when I'm engaged to do a lecture at some place in the world, at some university or some conference or some corporation wants me to talk, or some civic group wants me to talk and engages me to do it. Then I'll fill my calendar with that. But I don't have one that goes on for months and months and years. It's only when I'm engaged to come give a lecture somewhere.
Now, I know that you do admit that you believe that extraterrestrials from other worlds may have visited our planet, even though you don't have any proof. What do other astronauts think of you saying this publicly? Because a lot of them are hush-hush. I mean, what do they say to you about that behind the scenes?
Well, many will totally agree with me. The only difference is I grew up near Roswell, New Mexico.
There we go.
Which was the site of presumed landing in 1947. And I happened to be going off in high school, going off my senior year and going off to college when that happened in 1947. And on one day, the Roswell Daily Record said an alien spacecraft had crashed at a ranch near Roswell. And the next day, it denied that, came out and said no, it was a weather balloon, which was a plant story by the Air Force. Now, there have been about 4 or 5 plant stories since that time, or 6 or 7 maybe. If any of them were correct, one would have been enough. But after I went to the moon and went back to the Roswell, Pecos Valley area, Roswell and Pecos Valley, to see friends and to give invited lectures, I had people approach me who were what I call the old-timers, who had been there when I was there, and such people as the descendants of the undertaker who had provided coffins for the deceased aliens that they collected, and the descendants of one of the sheriff's troopers who had helped manage traffic around the site, and also a military officer who was a friend of the family, and all of these people wanted to talk after I'd come back from the moon, and that they had a story to tell that they'd been told to keep quiet about, and that, but they wanted to get it out before they passed, and they thought I might be safe to tell the story to. And they told me their story of the Roswell incident, all of which was to confirm that it was a real incident, alien craft, and it wasn't a weather balloon or any of the other stories that had been put out to cover it up. Now, subsequent to that time, I've become quite knowledgeable, and I know virtually all of the European and American investigators of the UFO phenomenon. I know them all first name, and read all their books, been at conferences with all of them, know their evidence, and I have no questions at all, no doubt at all, that we have been visited and probably have been visited for several hundred years over ages past. And I invite anybody that wants to look at it. If you find one of the famous Michelangelo paintings, there's a UFO up in one corner of it. And if you read the Bible, there's the question of, there's the text that talks about chariots of fire in the skies.
Mm-hmm. And the book of Ezekiel, yes.
Yes, they're all references there. And, but I don't consider myself a real UFO investigator, although I have read and know all of the good investigators, or the solid investigators in this country and in Europe. And if you follow the records, countries like Belgium and France and England and Brazil and Mexico have all opened their records, and the Vatican has even assented to all of this. So there doesn't seem to be much doubt in people's mind that have done any real serious looking. But yes, we've been visited and have been for quite some time.
Now, I only got a couple more questions for you there, Mitchell, because we're about out of time. But why don't you believe that these extraterrestrial beings land in mass and make friends with us? Why do they always seem to just observe us?
Well, that is because they're letting us, I would assume, do our own thing and run our own civilization. But there has been some, there's stories of abductions, there's story of interactions, quite a few as a matter of fact. But I invite people that want to know that to read the books on it, because there's quite a few books out on this, and I don't consider myself an expert in that area at all.
Well, I just had one more question, and then I want to give you the final word here. But I know in February of 2013, there is an asteroid DA-14, I believe that's the title of it, that's going to dip below our satellites. Do you think if this threatened to hit Earth, do you think that NASA would be ready to do something to deter a disaster?
Well, I think there's been quite that whatever asteroid type or meteor type objects approach Earth, I'm sure they're well observed, and astronaut Rusty Schweikert has been working on that problem for over 40 years, making sure that we have a way to deflect such an event or to threaten, and I would be fairly confident that that's prepared for, could be prepared for in time.
Well, that makes me feel a lot better, just hearing it from you. But is there anything that you would like to say to anybody out there listening right now? Any website you want them to visit, books you want to check out, or events you got coming up? Anything you want to say?
Well, no. There's my own website has most of my events on it, and that's edmitchellapollo14.com. It says where I'm going to be and where my lectures are. But beyond that, I don't have anything that I'm promoting right now.
All right, well, Doctor, I'll tell you what, I really, really appreciate you actually taking your time to come on my show. I know it's not the biggest venue, but it meant the world to me, buddy.
Okay, I'm glad you enjoyed it, and I did too. Thank you.
All right, thanks a lot. You have a good night.
You
All right, bye.